Welcome back. We are now entering into exercise 3 for Photoshop on project-specific techniques. So in this section of videos that you'll watch for exercise 3, we're going to be dealing with making touches to blending the imagery that you've selected and cut out and prepared up to this point and compose it inside of your scene, blending pieces together, adding highlights, or even false shadows where necessary to help create a believable final scene. So again, that'll be a process that usually involves several steps of working through and several passes, not unlike anything we've done before. We will look at some different tools, and we'll also look at some different methods and combinations of tools and process of how to accomplish this effectively. We'll also take a look at some of the creative filters within Photoshop too, and proper methods and ways for using those. All right, well, let's get started. For this particular video, we're going to be looking at reordering layers and also composing imagery inside of your scene. So getting things positioned. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open my file just so you guys can see this. I'm going to go to File. And I'm going to go to Open Recent because I've been working with this project file for a while. Now, if you're not working on a machine that has Open Recent available, like if you logged into a lab computer where it resets information every time the computer opens and closes, then you may have to go to File, Open, and search for your document. Wise rule of thumb is to always work with your project from the desktop. Please don't try working with it from a small portable drive like a thumb drive. Or something that doesn't have a fast connection. Your computer, if you can help it, leverage the speed of your computer first by putting documents, files, or whatever on the computer directly. That's just a simple rule of thumb to make things go faster for you. Okay, so I'm going to go into Open Recent and select this document and load it up. And depending on the size of your document, how many images you have, how big they are embedded into your Photoshop file, it may take longer for it to load. And that also depends on the speed and hardware of the computer you're using. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started with reordering our layers. So let's go to our layer panel over here on the lower right. And again, the layer panel really is the cornerstone of so much of what Photoshop is known for. And that ability to stack imagery. Now, the way we can understand it in terms of working with layers and how do we reorder them and what's the importance of that? Well, first off, layer order is huge. If you may notice on here on my canvas, my clouds and my water are primarily visible, but yet I have other imagery down below them or inside my document. So where are they? Well, if you look in between these two, they're in between, you should be able to see a sliver of this rock through them. And that image is actually hidden behind these two layers. So if I look at my layer stack over here, I can see that my rocks layer, which is what I'm seeing through the crack there, is all the way down here in my list. And the layer stack you can understand as being whatever's on top is going to be visible first. And everything else that goes after that is visible below it. So whatever is on top is going to be the first thing you see. That's why stacking a bunch of photographs together doesn't always pan out very well for us because we can't see through them to the next image, usually because they're full screen and so they cover the whole canvas up. Well, lucky for us, we've been cutting out and composing imagery so we can actually move things around and make them all visible. But we're going to reorganize this according to how we're going to edit. And so for now, what we need to do is make sure we have background layers where background layers need to be, and foreground imagery where it needs to be, and whether or not there's anything in the middle range. So our background is going to be the clouds and the water. So we need to take those and put them down towards the bottom of our layer stack. So I'm going to start by moving the water down. So I'm going to select my water layer, and I'm going to click and drag on it right here in the layer panel. And notice as I pull it, that a little white bar or a highlight bar shows between layers as I pass over them. That just indicates visually that you can let your layer go right there and it will drop it between those two layers. So if I let it go there, it goes between rocks and person. If I grab it again, I can drop it between background and person. Okay, Now let's get the clouds and do the same thing. And we're going to put the clouds right on top of the water layer. And from here, these last three layers, the ordering somewhat matters, because what we're going to do with these last three pieces is we're going to be combining these together to bring the tree, the character, and the rocks together to make one thing, which will involve some blending later. So right now, their order is not as important. But now that we've got our layers kind of in the order that we want them in so that we can see our imagery properly, now we're going to reposition them on screen to where they are going to be for the composition. So this is important for composing imagery inside of your design. Is again, follow your sketches. You should have a good compositional design already developed. It doesn't mean you can't experiment while you're in Photoshop, because there's nothing permanent we're doing right now. We can move around things as much as we want. Now, for moving around objects and items in here, we're going to switch over to our Move tool over here on the top of the toolbar. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to start moving a couple things around. First, we're going to start with the rocks. So I'm going to select my rock layer from my layer stack and then click and drag in the canvas. And so you can see that the rock layer can move. There is a neat feature you can turn on in Photoshop to help you out with a couple tasks that we'll be doing here and there. If you look up here on the top toolbar with the Move tool active, you have a button for Auto Select and for Show Transform Controls. These are two very handy options when working at this stage, where you need to move things around constantly and maybe even do slight size or rotation adjustments to them. So Auto Select is great if you just want to click inside your canvas to activate a layer. So I'm going to turn on Auto Select and I'm going to take it out of Group and use Layer. So watch this. So right now my rock layer is selected, right? So I can move it around. But what if I want to grab my person? Well, easy. Just click on your person and start dragging. Pretty cool, huh? And I can do the same with the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and have that running, and I'm going to reposition things. What our plan is for this image is that we want this tree to replace the head of the person, so the trunk is going to basically sprout out from the neck of the person. We also want this person to be positioned to where it looks like they are protruding out or growing out of the rocks, or that their legs are actually fused into the rocks. So it looks like a little island in the water. So we're going to adjust a couple things to make that happen. Some of the scaling needs to be changed. Well, first we'll start with the rock here. Now I'm going to go up here to the top options bar again, and I'm going to click on Show Transform Controls. Notice when I turn that on that it activates a transform box around your entire layer you're working with. Pretty cool, huh? So this makes it much easier. You don't have to use like Command T to activate transform if you don't want to. It's just there for you when you're ready for it. So I'm going to go ahead and do some minor rotation of this layer. So to rotate something with transform on, you just move your mouse out past one of the corners until the arrows turn into a corner like this, a little angled corner. And then you can click and drag. And you can start adjusting the angle of your rocks. So what I'm trying to do for my angle of my rocks is I want them to have, see this line of rocks right here? I want that to be a kind of straight line that protrudes out of the water. So I'm going to try to make that as horizontally correct as possible. And I'm going to do that by just rotating it a little bit, like this, leaving it alone, and then I can move my rocks around. Now it does, right now it's just rendering a preview because I haven't okayed my transformation. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit return to set the transformation. So now it's set on my object. Alright, now I'm going to go to my person, select them, and I'm going to go ahead and shrink them down. So with transform controls already active, you may not see the menu up here that allows you to do adjustments right away until you start grabbing and shrinking and growing it. And that's okay. If you want to, once you click and drag one of these, then you can lock these back together for your width and height, if you remember, so we don't distort the image. You can also hold down Shift while clicking on one of these corner controllers for the transform, and it will automatically lock the ratio for you. Now, a key hint when doing that, you must do the release of your keys and mouse buttons in a correct order or you will re-distort the image. So what I do is I let go of the mouse button first and then the Shift key. That way I don't accidentally slip on my mouse without Shift down, because Shift is what keeps the ratio connected so it doesn't distort. So again, I'm going to hold down Shift, click with the mouse to adjust the scale. And I'm just going to shrink him down just a little bit, about 48% of his original size. Hit return. And I'm going to also take the tree and do the same. Now, the trick with the tree is that right now I can't see through the neck to where it is. So I'm going to change the layer order between the person and the tree. So I'm going to put the tree layer down below the person so that I can see the thickness of the neck. What I want to happen with this is I want to create a blend between the tree trunk and the neckline. So I need to make the tree as thick as the neck. So to do that right, I'm just going to work with scaling it right here. So I'm just going to scale in ever so slightly, holding down Shift while clicking from a corner to drag it in. Now my computer is running a little bit slow inside the processor right now, so please please forgive me on that part. It does take a second sometimes for it to operate certain functions and functionality as I do these recordings. All right, we're getting closer. And what we can also do, you can also do things like make the layer that you're working on transparent. For any reason, if you wanted to, you can adjust its opacity over here. Notice when I do that, the tree layer, in a moment, will look a little more transparent. But I think it's, there it goes. Okay, so see, you can kind of see through the tree if you wanted to. So there's ways to do that in Photoshop real easy, like that. All right, so we're going to keep working here. And I'm going to bring the scale down a little bit more. I'm going to be holding down Shift and Option to shrink towards the center of my transform box. And I might even grab the anchor point and reposition it so that it's right over the area that I need to transform on. I'm going to put it right at the center of what I'm transforming around. And that'll actually help Photoshop understand what point it's supposed to be shrinking in towards. All right, we'll go ahead and OK the transformation right there. And I'm going to go to my person layer real quick. And I'm going to just turn down the opacity on him a little bit. So I'm just going to drag this little opacity slider in the layer area down, and then I'm going to zoom in a bit, just so I can see how well things are matching up. If they're not, then I need to move things around. So I'm going to go back to my tree layer, reselect my tree, and I'm going to use my arrow keys on the keyboard to do what's called nudging. So it does like a couple pixel nudges each time you do that. So you can use the up, down, left, or right arrow keys on your keyboard to very carefully and very precisely move imagery around. That's again for more precision. Now I'm going to probably drag the tree layer down. I'm going to hold down Shift while I do that and drag. And if you hold down Shift while dragging an object, it actually constrains the object to only move straight left or straight right. So I'm going to bring it down there because I want the tree to kind of protrude just a little bit out so that it has a little bit of trunk where the neck originally was. And I can tell my tree is not the right size currently. So I know I need to shrink it down again. So I'm going to just move my anchor point. Whoops. and hold down Shift and Alt. And gradually shrink inwards. There we go. And hit return to OK the transformation. Let's zoom out. And the last couple things we'll do here, we might even shrink the rocks down a little bit more, because what I want to happen is I want their legs to appear like they're coming out of the rocks, and I want the suitcase to look like it's over the top of the rocks. So the rocks are kind of big. So I'm going to select my rock layer now, and we're going to go ahead and shrink that down. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Option, and drag from a corner, shrink it down. Release the mouse, release the keys, and then just move this around some. Now, it may be that you even want to do some other things with your transform controls, like flip this image to face the other way, so mirroring it in the opposite direction. So I can get this right here to be directly below where the suitcase is. If you're going to do that, go up here to Edit, and this will give you access to your other transform controls. The specific one I want is the flip horizontal, so it literally rotates the image from one side to the other. See that? Works great with nondescript images, like things that don't have text on them, because when you flip text, it reads backwards, and then it looks very bad. So we got that flipped. Easy. Great. Now we're good to go. All right. So now we've reordered our layers, and we have repositioned them accordingly, and even did a little transforming to make sure everything fits together nicely. So that'll conclude this part of this particular tutorial. We'll come back together after this, and we'll look at methods for blending together imagery, and possibly looking at also working with clipping masks inside of Photoshop. All right. Talk to you guys then, and keep working hard.